I just wanted to circle back for a second to your background in developing community banks as an entrepreneur, and I think public opinion is kind of moving away from the big financial institutions, the national institutions, and people are looking to bank more at their small local financial services. And how do you think that would play out in legislation you might support, or I guess just a direct question, would you support reinstituting Glass-Steagall?
I think we have to look very hard at reinstituting Glass-Steagall. It's interesting. Dick Parsons, the chairman of Citicorp, just said it may have been a mistake. He just left the chairmanship of Citicorp, and he said if you go back and the removal of Glass-Steagall in 1998, which helped create Citicorp, he said we now know the ramifications, and in hindsight it was probably a mistake.
Can you just explain to people for a second what Glass-Steagall is?
Sure. The Glass-Steagall basically caused the separation of commercial banking, which was what you do at your local community bank, versus investment banking and asset management, where the bank is investing its own proprietary capital. So when you remove those barriers and put investment banking and the investment of your own proprietary capital with a commercial bank, it immediately sets up massive conflicts of interest. And we've seen that play out with all these firms. Look at what Goldman Sachs was doing, packaging up toxic mortgage securities, selling them off to their investors, and then betting against the very products they're selling. That's securities fraud.
Yeah.
And
just reinstituting that one piece of legislation would fix a broad spectrum of problems.
Oh, yeah. But it has to be bigger than that. Let me give you another example. Community banks have always had to have 6 to 7% tangible capital to their assets. So for, call it, for every $100 of assets, they had to have $6 or $7 in capital. Now, if a community bank fails, it's not going to cause any massive repercussions for the economy. It won't do anything like that. Maybe it hurts that little community, but it's not going to shake the global economy or bring down the American economy. But yet, the giant banks like Citicorp, like J.P. Morgan, like Wells Fargo, you name them, all were able to get away with operating with about 1.5% to 2% capital to their assets. Now think of how insane that is. So for every $100 of assets they had, they only had to carry $1.50 or $2, where a community bank that doesn't create any systemic risk has to carry $6 or $7.
And their investments are so leveraged up, it doesn't take more than a couple ticks to wipe them out, basically?
Yeah, they're so levered. Plus, the assets they're carrying on their balance sheet are riskier in most cases. So, it's not just removing Glass-Steagall, it's holding them to the same standards, or what should have been higher standards, because if you're systemically important, don't you think then you would have actually higher capital levels, maybe like 10% tangible capital to assets, that makes you much less vulnerable to a shock? It's logical. Yeah. It's common sense. But, what happens is our political system has been bought off by crony capitalism, special interests that have just manipulated the system. It's what I talk about in our tax code. We have so much corporate welfare in our tax code, and what does that do? It shifts the whole tax burden to small and medium-sized businesses. So today, we have the highest corporate tax rate in the world. Think of how perverse that is. We're at 35%. China has a 25% corporate tax rate. France, Sweden, Italy, Spain, every Latin American country has a lower corporate tax rate. The only country that had a higher corporate tax rate than us was Japan. And look at how they've done for the last 20-plus years. They just lowered theirs on April 1st, and they're going to lower it again over the next 2 years. So what happens is we have so much crony capitalism, and that's just another thing these career politicians have given us, that have allowed the people with big money to buy off politicians, to manipulate our tax code, manipulate regulations like they were in the banking industry. And it's happened across the board.
Okay. I don't want to take up too much of your time here. We'll wind it down in just a minute. But circling back to the Federal Reserve again, I didn't ask you, what do you think, how do you prevent the Fed from doing what they're doing? Do you revoke the dual mandate?
You revoke the dual mandate. You absolutely revoke the dual mandate, because in their attempt to create full employment, all they actually do is create higher unemployment because they can't create jobs. So you get rid of the dual mandate. I totally agree with Ron Paul that you have an audit of the Fed. And the other thing, which is just logical, you stop appointing nothing but academics to the board. They live in a world of theory. They don't operate in the real world and understand how global capital markets actually work at the ground level. So you start appointing people that have actually worked in those markets and understand how they work instead of just always picking academics. So some are structural changes and some are just, common sense changes by, the White House, who has the opportunity to pick the people that serve on the Fed.
Okay.